everybody. Dan Illman and Mike Beer kicking off a 50-cent pick 5 at Keeneland on Thursday with our DRF race of the day. Race number 5, second level allowance, going 1.5 miles, 3 turns around Keeneland's grass course. Let's take a look at this field. Please scan or click the QR code for race of the day access on mobile with free formulator past performances. 7-5 on the morning line on the number 4, the Gray Wizard, who earned a graded stakes placing last year at Del Mar. Returns off a little bit of a layoff for one of the great layoff trainers around, Graham Motion.
Yeah, you don't really have to worry about the layoffs too much with Motion. This horse looked pretty good to me last year, Dan. I think he's got a lot of room to improve still. He's just going to need some kind of a trip here at a short price.
We'll throw up our time form U.S. pace projector, see where the Gray Wizard is early, and that's near the back of the pack. Microphone, the number 8, is far from a blazer, but he's a horse that can get close to the pace. Surf for sure seems like a horse that's somewhat versatile from a running style standpoint. There doesn't seem to be a lot of speed in this race. I wouldn't be surprised if they go pretty slow early.
Yeah, I'm expecting this race to be pretty moderate here, Dan. I do think the 8 probably has a pretty good chance to make the lead here as he stretches way out in distance for the first time. I'm not sure how good he is, but making the lead could go a long way in here.
The good news for the 1, Kitten Mischief, is that he's a horse that can adapt to the pace and pretty much be anywhere the rider wants him to be. He also seems to be a late maturing type that's coming into his own at the right time and has really benefited from this extra distance. Here's his first level allowance win at Gulfstream, going 1.5 miles back on New Year's Day, where he beat 3 next out winners. The 6th place finisher came back to win a $12,000 starter allowance, but did so with an 89 buyer. This horse has, had his share of layoffs. It's a bit of a worry, but when he's on the track, he's in pretty good form.
Yeah, he wins this race, and he's very game to hold on in the stretch here, Dan, but he also had a pretty soft trip in that race. He just got right up close to a very deliberate pace in there, and you could see that he still had plenty left as that field came through the stretch there. He was game to hold on. I liked the effort overall, but there in some ways I just thought he took advantage a little bit last time. And it just makes me want to see him do it again against some better horses here as they go 1.5 miles time.
The number 2 is Blanket of Roses. This horse is taking a substantial step up in class. He was entered in an $8,000 claimer last time out over the all-weather at Turfway. He got wired that day, but he's a 1-run closer. It's at the mercy of race and pace luck. Stepping up in class might work against him.
Yeah, not sure that the step up in class helps him. I'm not even really sure that the longer distance helps him, Dan. They've tried 1.5 miles with him a few times in the past. It hasn't really gone that well. I realize, maybe in some tougher races, but it's not like this is an easy spot for him. This horse is stepping up out of 5 and 8 claimers.
Number 3 is Cool Rags. This horse has done his best running on the synthetic surface at Turfway Park. He exits a 7th place finish there against second level allowance horses. The 3rd place finisher would come back and run second in a 62.5 claimer on dirt with an 83 buyer. But he's 0 for 10 on turf. There are big questions about whether he's as good on this surface as he is at Turfway. And this is probably a tougher field than what he's been facing.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I feel like, at least as opposed to some of the others in here, I feel like the distance is probably okay for this horse. But boy, his turf form overall, it's not that good.
The number 4 is the Gray Wizard. He was graded stakes place 3 starts back at this 1.5 mile distance. Then he looked good, winning a first level allowance at Santa Anita. They cut him back to 1.25 miles. He sat in between horses and just bowled his way through at the 3/16. Pulled clear to win impressively. And last time out, he was in a tough spot, the San Marcos. He finished ahead of a horse that came back to place in the Grade 2 Whittingham with a 96 buyer. Just a snug fit at this level.
Yeah, this is a really good spot for this horse to come back, make his 4-year-old debut. I liked all of his races, basically, Dan, when he got over here last year for Motion. I just feel like he really progressed very nicely. His running style is a little bit problematic, as we talked about in the open. He's probably going to need, some kind of a clean trip in this race. But if he gets one, I expect this horse to be really tough. This horse seems very progressive to me.
It usually pays to follow Michael Maker trained horses after they're claimed and they're stretched out in distance. Case in point's the 5 Wicked Past. He was taken for $35,000 out of a condition claiming event last summer at Saratoga. And while he hasn't won for Maker, he's earned a stakes place in going long on the synth. He's run well against decent company going long on the turf. He's another horse getting a little bit of class relief, but he's also a horse with no early speed whatsoever and might need a little help at a relatively short price on the morning line.
Yeah, that could be a problem for him. Even if you go back into that Pan Am last time too, Dad. I mean, that was not a slow pace that distance. This horse was last, but they were sort of moving right along in there, and the closers had a real shot at that race, and including this horse. And he was just sort of making up ground at the end when the race was already over. I didn't really love that performance from him. I get it; he's dropping out of several stakes races. This is a much better spot for him. And overall, his form makes him a major player in here. But if I was going to play against one of the favorites, it would be him, and it wouldn't be the 4.
The trainer Todd Pletcher has taken his time with the 6 minus, who was dangled in several claiming races, but it just appears like he's slowly rounding into his best form, and he's a long striding horse that appreciates the distance. Here's his victory in a first level allowance at Gulfstream back in early February, and this pace was solid. He kind of crept up onto the field on the far turn, and he just draws with no problems in the final 3/16.
Yeah, I like the way he finishes this race off. He did get an overall good trip this race, but I just like the way he finishes it. And I think your point's well taken. That he's the kind of horse I feel like it took him a while to get there. He's an English channel, so that's not that surprising. And it just feels like he's really getting good now. Even the race 2 back when Kitten Mischief beat him. I mean, this horse to me ran a deceptively good race that day, Dan. I mean, there was no pace in front of him, and Irad just sort of sat in, saving ground behind horses. He actually finished up well that day too.
Another son of English Channel is up next. That's the 7 English Conqueror, graded stakes raced on the turf up at Woodbine back in 2021. He finished off his 2022 season with a close third in the Grade 3 valedictory over the synthetic surface. There was some pace going on in this race as well, going a mile and a half. You see him sort of angle out to split horses, and he's going to come with a good run and just miss at a big price.
Yeah, he runs well in here. You're right, though, that the race sets up pretty well for him. I like this effort, though. He's got several performances that would give him a real chance in here, and he's acquitted himself very solidly against Graded Stakes Company, too, Dan. I mean, there's enough to like about this horse at 10-1 to keep an open mind about him. I'm not sure he's the best closer in the race, but if he works out a trip here, he's dangerous.
Microphone, the number 8, is stretching out in distance, and that stretch out is a big concern, but it also allows him the freedom to get right up close to the pace, if not outright control it, as Timeform US believes. He scored last time out in the fairgrounds at a first level allowance race. This is a tougher spot, obviously from a class standpoint, obviously from a distance standpoint, but he's still very lightly raced, and he's got enough European stamina influences in his family that makes me think this distance is not impossible.
Yeah, well, I'll agree with that. I think the added distance isn't really supposed to be a concern for him. I think he's a half brother to Serve the King, who he's a Grade 2 winner going long on the turf. He's Grade 1 placed going long on the turf. So he's got the pedigree to handle it. My question, Dan, is, how good is this horse? I never really thought he was much when Chad Brown had him. I know that he's won for this trainer since they switched him back over to turf, but I think he's got to run a lot better than any of those prior races to be effective here.
The number 9 is Sir for Sure, who got a well-deserved break after his most recent start for trainer Mark Casse. He competed in all 3 legs of Canada's Triple Crown in 2022. He was third on the all-weather in the Queen's Plate, dumped the jock on dirt in the Prince of Wales. He came through in the 3rd leg of the Triple Crown, the Breeders' Stakes, going a mile and a half. I like the way he cruised up 4 wide on the turn here to get into contention. And once he strikes the front, I don't think this is the strongest field in the entire world, but I like the way he finished it off, going the mile and a half.
Yeah, he certainly looked like a horse who maybe just really took to the turf here, Dan. He always traveled pretty comfortably in this race, just sort of sitting on the outside. He doesn't, blow this field away through the stretch. Like you, I thought he made a nice move on the turn, and now he's just sort of grinding to the finish, but he's going to get the job done. I guess if he just takes a little bit of a step forward off of that, he's supposed to be pretty tough in here, and the distance feels like it's no problem for him.
Before we get to our top selections, please click that subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. Top pick time for our Thursday race of the day. 6 minus is Progressive Mike. He's a horse that in the beginning of his career didn't look like he was going anywhere, but you mentioned his late developing pedigree. Distance is good for him, and his last race was solid. And listen, there's no drop here. Todd throwing him right into the 2nd level allowance.
Yeah, and he's got a little bit of tactical speed too, so I don't think he's one of the horses who will be affected by a slow pace in this race. I kind of, Dan, wish he didn't have that last win there because maybe that was the time to have him, because I really thought he was compromised 2 starts back. But I think this horse is headed the right way. He's going to be a price in here.
Surfer sure made the surface switch. First time turf in the Breeders' Stakes, the third Jewel of Canada's Triple Crown. You saw how that worked out. It worked out very well. Now he's going to have to deal with a little bit of a layoff. Maybe this is just a prep race for something at Woodbine down the road as stakes competition. But again, he's tactical as well as 6-. I think he can sit a pretty good trip. I like the way he won the Breeders. I'll give him a shout off the bench. 9-5-4-7 for me, 6-4-9-5 for Mike. Thursday DRF race of the day is the 5th at Keeneland. Best of luck.